and we are at Camille's garden today. Camille is behind the camera. We designed this garden together, and it's essentially a butterfly pollinator garden, and we also added in things that just have color. It's right next to her house, and so when she's sitting on her deck or her patio, we wanted to be able to see lots of flowers, lots of color, but also do nice things for the bees and the butterflies, which also create interest. The view from Camille's house and patio is of this beautiful pollinator garden. And we started this garden because it was sloped and sunny, and you can kind of see in here there's a lot of rock outcropping, which is very typical in northern Westchester Zone 6 where we are. So we were like, what do we do here? And so the first thing we did was talk about, the fact that you'll see this year round. So if you're outside, you see it. If you're inside the house, because it has a perfect view of it. So we started with some foundation plants. We worked with boxwoods because they're evergreen, very hardy here, and deer resistant, which is an issue where we are. And the other thing, you want to walk this way? The other thing that is in here, which you wouldn't even know now, but there is the top of the septic. And so there was this big sort of concrete block, and we were like, okay, it's here, it's not going anywhere. So we kind of incorporated it into the design. So, the view from the house used to be sort of this like mishmash of, it was grass and then there was this concrete top. And so now what you see is this beautiful garden. You don't even know that that's the reason why it's here. But design-wise, what we did is there's a bird bath. We kind of put some, there's dahlias in a tub, which, that's sitting on top of that concrete block. You can't tell. And then we kind of circled it very loosely with all these plants. And we came up with the idea of a pollinator garden, mostly because it would be lots and lots of color, lots of flower. It's really close to the house, and you could see all the color. You really get a great view of this garden for her house with a lot of interest. So here you see we have butterfly bush, which is really pretty. This variety, I believe, is Black Knight. It's really tall. It gets massively big. You can cut it down to the ground in the fall or early spring, and this is the growth this year. So you can see it's probably about 6-7 feet tall already, and it will bloom all summer long. It's really just started. Once the blooms fade out, you can cut them off, and it encourages, you see the 2 little blooms on the side, and that will keep going and going, which is great. So in the garden itself, and you can barely tell because it's covered with all these plants, which is so pretty, but look, there's a pathway. So we kind of connected the garden, the pollinator garden, through, just to give you a little visual. In the winter, you really see this. It stands out, and it's kind of a nice connection to the bird bath. But again, this was like a slab of concrete, and we were just trying to find a way to disguise it. So this being northern Westchester, we have a lot of properties in the area, homes that have deer, and this is no exception. We're very lucky here because the deer population isn't as bad as some areas, but you can see some plants that are even considered deer resistant get eaten, nibbled. This is a black-eyed Susan. They're deer resistant, but you can see they got eaten by the deer. This one pretty badly. It's already sending up new shoots. You can do things about that. You can spray for deer, or you can just let the deer kind of nibble where they may. Use deer resistant plants, and then some things get eaten and some things don't. Oh, I'm standing in the middle of the butterfly garden, and it's just to kind of give you a glimpse of what's sort of tucked inside here. So you can't really see it now, but this is a boxwood. There are a bunch of them, I think 5, maybe 7 tucked in here, and you really don't see them when there's lots of flowers around, but in the winter it does create some evergreen interest. They're very hardy here, very deer resistant, and this is a variety called Winter Gem, which is more of a spreader but very soft, so it's kind of a nice piece to have. Now it doesn't get seen, but in the fall when things start to fade out and winter, you can really see it from the house. So I'm standing right now. This is an annual here. This is Verbena
Bonariensis.
bonariensis. This is Verbena bonariensis. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. This is a taller variety. They have all different kinds here. It's very deer resistant, and it just flowers and flowers and flowers, which is, you know, kind of the point of this garden. And then I'm also mixed in here with, you can see the coneflower. This is a white coneflower echinacea. That's a big pollinator. And behind it, there is, it's in the sun, so I hope you can see it, is a bee balm, also called Monarda is the Latin name. But that's a real nice spreader, so it really fills in. And in the backdrop, you have the butterfly bush, different varieties in here. This one, I believe, is a nano purple, but this one's the Black Knight. The Black Knight gets a little taller. You can see they're very similar, but they have their own characteristics. The flowers are a little bit different. The heights of the plants are different. And then as you walk through, you can see, we can talk about the calamint here, which is just starting. It's a little white, very, very deer resistant, which is nice. Once this starts flowering, it will just bloom for the rest of the summer, which is great. Right. This is another view in the butterfly garden. You can see here we have the boxwood kind of tucked in. You can barely see it because there's so many flowers around it. We have the cranesbill geranium in the front. I think there's a little Veronica? No. What is that called?
That's salvia.
Salvia. Thank you. We have some salvia up in the front. We have, which blooms early, which is nice. And this is kind of, if you cut it back, it's a second flush of color. You have the cranesbill geranium. That's the boxwood. And here is more nephida. As you come towards the back of this little pocket, this is Caryopteris. And Camille and I were just talking about its cons and its pros. I guess you would say its pros and its cons. It is a very late to leaf out. It gets a flower. I'm not sure, this one might be like a little pink. And at the end of the season, it gets a little, I think these are them forming, it gets some really pretty berries, which is a lot of nice interest. So a lot of times if you go to the nursery at the end of the summer, you can find these because they're really in their glory. But it takes a really long time for them to fill out. I love the fact that it has this sort of burgundy touch to the leaf. And we have other pieces of burgundy color leaves in here as well. Just a little bit over to the to my right. And then I won't show you, we can kind of look at it later, but there's a smoke bush towards the other end of the butterfly garden. So we've moved over to sort of the front end of the butterfly garden, mostly because it's 9 o'clock in the morning and it is getting full sun throughout the garden. So in the morning, before 9, it's like dappled sun, but this garden will get sun the rest of the day. So it's a really hot garden, which is great because a lot of the pollinators really love that. And the garden does so well. And we have other things tucked in. I talked about this is a smoke bush with the purple, burgundy kind of leaves, which I think adds a lot of interest. Plus, it extends its way through the garden, which is kind of nice. And then tucked in front of it, it's a little bit smaller, but there's some low-growing sedums that have a very similar color. It's just a nice combination. There's another coneflower. This is a yellow echinacea. And then kind of tucked in underneath the smoke bush is a Japanese forest grass. And it looks like it's in full sun now. It actually does get shaded a little bit when the smoke bush is in full, glory. But it does really well there. And then this is kind of tucked in the rocks. This was here when we started. It is a bleeding heart, spectabilis. This one's a pink flower, and this comes up early. It's really deer resistant, and it's just really nice color. Like when everything's still looking sort of dull in this garden, it's very bare. This is up, it's flowering, it's beautiful, and it's really close to the house. So we did try to put in interests that starts early and kind of continues its way through, but right now is when the garden really takes its form and is in its glory. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on a tour of Camille's Pollinator Garden. We hope that it inspired you to get out into your garden and plant things that you love.